Now we'll get into the West, and we will start at the bottom of the Central Division. A team that they seem to have a lot of conversations. You got Jacob Chikrin, although I'm with you, Frank. I think it's less likely that he gets traded. But Phil Kessel. I'm telling you, I think Wedgwood is the surprise name who could get moved for Arizona. Any other players you see in Arizona that you think are good chances to get moved?
Yeah, I think there's been increased chatter again this week about Lawson Krause. I don't see it because he's been really productive. He's had a good year, and he's knocking on the door of 20 goals. He's a pending restricted free agent at 1.5. You got to ice a team next year. Who's going to be in your lineup? I don't think they're moving Schmaltz. I don't think they're moving Keller. The other possibility is Vejmelka. So that's it.
No. Okay.
Actually, there's one more guy I think that popped up. Johann Larson. He's been injured, but how close is he to returning? I think that's one guy that there's a couple teams that have interest in, just to maybe beef up a team on the wing.
Well, I know a Wood guy on Twitter is a big analytics guy, and he's crunched his numbers for years and thinks that Larson could be a sneaky pickup for a team. So we'll look at that. But I'm telling you, I think Wedgwood's, everybody's talking about Vejmelka. Wedgwood actually had better numbers. So he costs you nothing. I think he's going to be the guy. That's my surprise pick. No one's talking about him. I think that's the guy who gets moved.
Interesting.
There. The Chicago Blackhawks. Man, they're open for business, Frank. Their GM has said it. How open ultimately do you think they end up being? Like how busy, I should say, rather than open. They're wide open, but how busy do you think the Hawks are between now and Monday's deadline?
Pretty busy. Calvin DeHaan, they're trying to move him. He's second round pick territory, I think. That's what they're looking for. Teams are hoping that it drops a bit. I mentioned Boston as being one of the teams interested. Everyone's curious about Fleury. He might be the most intriguing player at the deadline. Brandon Hagel's in our top 10. I think there's been no shortage of interest in him with the season he's had. It's, he's got an outside chance at 30 goals. What a revelation he's been. And also 2 more years at 1.5 is just unreal.
It makes no sense for Chicago to trade him for me.
Well, he has more value to other teams than he does to the Blackhawks. That's the truth. They're rebuilding. He has more value to others at 1.5 than he does. The contract is nice, but it doesn't mean anything for the Hawks because they don't have any cap space issues.
Okay, but I'll counter. So what are you going to get? Let's say you get a first rounder for him.
They're going to get they're asking for a first rounder and a top prospect, like a grade A prospect.
Yeah.
What if, so let me just play devil's advocate with you. And this is what other teams have asked is what if Brandon Hagel is Ryan Hartman?
He's having one great year offensively.
Well, think back to a number of years ago, Ryan Hartman was a first round pick, which means something because Hagel wasn't. Hagel was a late round pick. But Ryan Hartman had 19 goals at the deadline, and they traded him to the Nashville Predators for a first round pick.
Yeah.
Hagel has 21 goals. They were the same age, 23 at the time. And Hartman just ended up being a so-so guy until breaking out essentially 4 years later with the Minnesota Wild this year, scoring 24.
Yeah. Here's my reason why I think they're different. I'm a big believer that, scoring is an ability you have. If you look at Hartman in the WHL, in junior in Plymouth, he was like a point a game guy. He scored 25 goals. Brendan Hagel was a 100-point player in junior, right? He had 41 goals one season. He had 31 another year. Like that guy has more of a proven pedigree of offense. So if I'm betting on who I think could maintain it more, I would bet on Hagel.
The productivity has been great. The other part about Hagel that's awesome is he digs in. He works. Yes. He competes. He's versatile. He can play power play. He can play penalty kill. He plays well defensively. Like there's not really any hole in Brandon Hagel's game, which is another reason why the ask is what it is. Dominic Kubalik is a guy they're trying to move. I think they're in late round pick territory for Kubalik.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, Fleury's obviously the main one, but I look at Chicago, and when you say you're in a rebuild, having watched it up close for many years, the biggest mistake you make is you trade away. Brendan Hagel's 23. He's got an unreal contract for 2 more years. By then he's 25, and if he's established, you re-sign him anyway at $4 million, and he's still more value to your team, because even a top prospect, the chance of that top prospect scoring you 25 to 30 goals is low. So I think you could make it, and then you sell yourself on hope. But like if Brendan Hagel made $5 million, Frank, I could see it. But even if he regresses to only scoring 20 goals next year, $1.5 million is still an unreal bargain. Like I wouldn't.
That's why he's a bargain for another team.
Yeah. Oh no, I
like
get
I
it.
Said, the Hawks have his contract doesn't really mean anything to them.
Yeah. Wow.
What about Dylan Strohm? Would you trade for Dylan Strohm? And what would you trade for Dylan Strohm? 16 goals, 16 assists in 48 games, has really come alive of late, has played well with Kane. And this is a guy that you could have got for
nothing.
In October.
Yeah. So yeah, he's an interesting one. Like you look at his brother Ryan and just at his development curve, and you know what? He really took off. Now he took off playing with Perron, but still, you got to be a good player to play with good players. So, man, I would probably I would roll the dice on Strohm, because I don't think it's going to cost you very much, Frank. I think the cost is going to be way lower. And now I know you have to qualify him. I think at 3, maybe 3. I have to look at his contract. Maybe it's 3-2. But I think Dylan Strohm might be a guy where the light bulb went on, and it's just taken a little bit longer, similar to his brother.
Maybe, but he's had stretches like this before and then has been rocked to sleep afterwards.
Yeah, no,
he had a 51-point season a number of years ago in 58 games.
Yeah.
51 and 58, and then did basically jack squat last year.
Yeah. So, he might have been one of those guys, Frank, that, the whole COVID thing just wasn't a fit for him, right? You're isolated. Anything. You never know. Like,
could be playing on a bad team. It could be
the human things. That too, and the human element side of it. When guys have really odd years in the COVID one, I've learned that it's one where I would be like, hey, if he's bounced back now and things are back to normal, and he was there before it was normal, that the outlier might be the COVID factor, right? And
he's also already been traded once.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's the other advantage, Frank. And you've talked to a lot of people about this. Acquiring guys who have already been traded is maybe a better bet in season, because they've handled it once. So it might not take them as long to get comfortable in their new surrounding.
Winnipeg?
Whew, what about the Jets, hey? They've obviously they got to beat Vegas again. They've got to go on a real big run here. I think they ultimately end up being sellers, and I think Andrew Kopp's the main guy who goes.
Yeah, I mean that's what all signs are pointing to. They're on track for 89 points. They've increased their pace. They were on track for 85 a week ago, 83 before that. They've tightened the standings chase, but the math is not in their favor. Kopp is an obvious, easy guy to move, and there'd be lots of interest. He's versatile again, can play wing, can play center, is conscientious defensively, smart player.
Colorado.
I haven't heard almost anything about Paul Stasny. Like what an underrated season he's had at age 36.
Yeah.
31 points, 17 goals in 50 games. He's on track for his first 20-goal season since 2014.
Boston Bruins and Paul Stastny, Andrew Kopp in Colorado. That's my prediction.
Okay.
But you're right, Frank. Stastny has very quietly had a good season. And I think because there's been such a focus on Winnipeg underachieving, right? That as a team, which is fair, but there's been some individuals that have had good years.
Mm-hmm.
So now you get into what's fascinating in that division, the Dallas Stars. And you mentioned earlier Andre Sekera on waivers. They're making moves. You think Nick Leddy's the guy? What other moves do you see them making?
I think that's kind of I don't see them going out and taking a big swing, but maybe a small addition that can help their group. And I think Leddy fits. They have to move money. Sekera on waivers was their way to do it, at least to start. Leddy makes a lot of sense. And then I think after that, you just let the chips fall where they may. Klingberg, you keep him. They re-signed Pavelski. You're keeping Holtby. It's just an amazing turnaround for a team that we all wondered for the longest time, would they be buyers, is now in a position to actually add at the deadline because they've played so well during this stretch. And I don't know, they're a fascinating team. I guess my only question is, because it looks and all the math suggests that they're the second wild card, can they really give Colorado a run for their money? That's what it all comes down to. There's a 22-point gap between these teams.
Well, if you listen to Daryl Sutter, Frank, it'd be a waste of 8 days.
It feels like that, doesn't it? So then you're asking yourself, why are you adding?
But then I think every team will say, hello, Columbus Blue Jackets 2019.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know that they're not. Columbus Blue Jackets went out and traded for a bunch of guys.
Right. But my point was they were still like, they played Tampa, who was the dominant team that everybody thought would roll them. That's what that's a different year. The year they added all the pieces, they won the first round and lost to Boston in the second. No, but I'm talking about, Frank, I'm talking about the upset special. When you say, I don't care who the wild card team is, you have no chance. That's what I'm suggesting.
I thought you meant in terms of adding.
No. I was saying that when you're in, you never know. I agree with Daryl Sutter's premise, but even last year, most people thought Toronto was going to walk Montreal. They
are battle tested. I mean, look, there's no question. Like, they've gotten to the Stanley Cup final. They've got veteran pieces. They're hard to play against. You got to get Heiskanen healthy. He's got to get over the mono. And that's such a big part of their team. I don't think they have even a prayer if Heiskanen's not playing or if he's not close to 100%.
Yeah, that's the wild card. And honestly, with mono, you
don't know.
It's not like a shoulder injury or a knee where you're like, okay, 4 to 6 weeks. Mono, you have no idea it can be devastating. It just takes you 4 months to get over for some people. So who knows? But yeah, that's the wild card. Now we get to my team, Frank, my surprise team, the Nashville Predators.
Your squad.
They got so much cap space, and cap space, like I know you can make some trades work, but I think they've got the flexibility. And the one player's name who intrigued me that you talked about was, I wonder if the Predators look at Bertuzzi. Right? Once you brought him up, like, he kind of fits their style. The other thing I think they need, though, is I think they need a right defenseman.
Yeah, they tried the right defensive route, getting Phil Myers from the Flyers last year. They definitely could use a right shot guy. I think the Preds are another team that I think they've probably even surprised themselves this year with how well they've played. And a lot of that's been on the back of their third line and the shot in the arm that they've gotten from Jeannot and Trennan and that group. How much do you want to spend?
Yeah,
they were teetering on the edge of a rebuild.
You got that goalie, though. Like, the goalie can steal you series, right? And they got one of the they got top 3 defensemen in the league. Like,
they're going to be hard out for whoever they play. Nashville, Calgary would be a really good first round series.
Ooh, that would be a battle.
And that's what they're tracking towards right now.
Yeah. Like, I look at the Preds right now, and I think, obviously anybody who's taken on Colorado is the underdog. Let me make that abundantly clear. But I think Nashville might surprise some teams here. And like David Poile, he's got lots of experience, Frank. You wait and maybe you can make a move. I agree with you. They don't want to mortgage the future. I don't think they're there yet, but they could add some guys that other teams are just like, hey, you know what? Here you go. Like, we'll get rid of this guy because, we're not going anywhere and he's a UFA. And, if you don't have to give up lots, like some mid-round picks, Nashville's my surprise team at the deadline. I think they might make more moves than we're thinking.
I just don't. Yeah, I don't know who is in that category. Like, who's handing you a right shot guy to add to your mix?
Yeah. Well, the problem is there's not great right shot defensemen to be added. That's the one to me. that's interesting. So that's their problem, but they definitely could use one. Now the Minnesota Wild, and what's interesting about the Wild is the Jack McBain factor, right? And so he's not on the roster, right? So how much like does he have more value than a 2022 first round pick in your eyes?
No.
Okay.
They're trying to get a second for him.
Yeah.
So
Boston?
maybe. I don't have a real sense on where he wants to go, because that's the tricky part about all of this is like no one wants to give up anything unless they know they're signing him.
Yeah. So that obviously Minnesota, I would assume, as part of the deal, would give you permission to talk to his camp. Obviously.
I would think so.
Yeah. So they made the move, Tyson Jost did that, kind of a hockey trade where they added some salary to get rid of Nico Sturm. I think they're hoping that, Jost is obviously a guy that will
More
give
upside.
them a bit of depth scoring for them. Do you see them making any other moves? Like they're a unique situation, Frank, because if they're in cap hell the next 3 years because of all the dead cap space. If you're Bill Guerin, you go for it.
I'm so torn on the Wild because I think when they play to their ability and to their identity, I think they have as good a chance as anyone in the West to knock off Colorado, if anyone can.
Okay.
I put them in the same category as St. Louis and Calgary. This swoon over these last few weeks has really has me concerned as to will they be able to find their stride in time for the playoffs to be that team? And will an acquisition help them or hurt them?
Like when I look at Minnesota, like, hey, I'll say this: Kaprizov, man, that guy's lived up to everything. So good for him. I look at, what Minnesota needs, Frank? I think they need some size in their top four, right? Which is hard to find, right? That's my one concern about the Wild come playoff time is do they, Spurgeon and Dumba, Brodin and Goligoski, are they big and heavy enough to go deep in the playoffs?
I just think their forwards are so big and heavy enough that that's not a concern.
Okay. Yeah, you're right. They definitely, they have the counterbalance there for sure.
I think they're poking around ever so slightly on the goalie market as well. Just checking prices. I could see them doing nothing, and I could see them doing something big.
Yeah. Well, Bill Guerin, man, he comes from the Jim Rutherford tree of GM, so can never rule him out to make a big deal. That's for sure. The St. Louis Blues, you mentioned Mr. Rutherford or Armstrong, excuse me, is involved, and he's got his ear in every conversation. Like St. Louis is a fascinating team to me, Frank, because they're not far removed from winning. They've still got a lot of very good players at a lot of different positions. Husso's been very good in goal. Binnington's starting to find his game. So, I don't know who's going to be their goalie. They might be Pittsburgh, where both of them play. But what do you think they need?
They need a partner for Colton Parayko, because for a long stretch this year, it had been Mikko Mikkola.
Yep.
They need some versatility at forward, I think, as well. Someone that can go up and down their lineup, someone that can play center and wing. Just on a pure stylistic basis, I think they could actually use a little Nick Paul.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
I think defensively, though, I think they're willing to swing big. Here's their
Hampus
problem.
Lindholm.
Hampus Lindholm. They don't have any money.
Yes, that's their problem.
They
Lots
would
of
need
teams
to
are in that
move
boat.
out money, and who would it be? David Perron is a pending UFA, but he's also been one of their hottest players again.
Yeah, I don't think you can trade him.
He's a proven playoff performer too. I agree with you. How could they possibly trade him? The better question is, why isn't he re-signed?
I think, you know what, when you look at David Perron, I think he wants to be in St. Louis. They want him there. I think that's a late signing that could easily happen. That's probably why it hasn't happened, to be honest. The thing that the Blues have done, Frank, is, they've been able to retool on the fly internally. Thomas and Kyrou have really stepped up offensively for them, and those guys got another year of great contracts. They're under $3 million at 2.8. I think the Blues, if there's one mistake they made a little bit, is the construction of their defense. Of when you compare their Stanley Cup winning defense to this one, that to me, it's a little bit different. I agree with you. They could use a partner there. Hampus Lindholm would be unreal. And I don't know how they would acquire him, but if they could, then there'd be a trade later than in the summer, as you talked about it earlier. You don't worry about it, but then they'd have to move on to Falk or Krug in the summertime. I think to re-sign Lindholm, but he's the perfect fit if they want to swing big. He's the perfect fit.
Their issue is all the guys they have with term, like that Falk contract.
Yeah,
is going to hurt.
Yes.
I think ultimately the Scandella contract hurts. Like they got him from Montreal and immediately signed him to that deal. Parayko's deal will be fine. I'm not as worried about Krug, but Falk's deal is really going to hurt. I mentioned on Thursday the idea of the Blues offering up Binnington as a solution to some teams and their goaltending problems. That would be one way to move money. I just don't think anyone's willing to bite on Binnington and the contract.
Yeah. And hockey trades around the deadline are rare historically, right? I think, if you can make a Binnington move, it might be more of an off-season move, right? But you're right, though, about that's how you free up the money for sure.
Well, then you can re-sign. Not only can you do something at the deadline, then you can also just keep Husso.
Yes.
And keep him at a lesser number and lesser term than Binnington, and you're set. You can find another backup to play with Husso next year.
Yeah, tough to trade a goalie with term at that point when, now it all depends. What if Binnington, whose game is slowly starting to come around here, what if he picks it up in the playoffs? Coaster. Yeah, it has been. Now, I thought the Colorado Avalanche on Monday, we were asked, and of course, then they made 2 trades right after our pod. I think there's another one coming. I think Kopp makes a lot of sense for that team. I just think Joe Sakic is going in. I love the Josh Manson trade. I absolutely love that trade. He's exactly what they need for that team. I think he's a perfect fit. And, Sturm gives them a guy that can win some faceoffs. He's not a top-end forward, centerman, but he can win some faceoffs for them. The Andrew Kopp rumors, Frank, they make so much sense to me. And I think Joe Sakic is going to push even more chips in here. I expect another significant deal from them before Monday.
Yeah, and look, they're still squarely in the Claude Giroux race. That's at least what I'm told, that of all the other contending teams that I checked in with, everyone else said on Friday that they're out. So that leaves 2. And man, what a fit Giroux would be, and they can afford the cap hit with the money that they moved out by trading Jost, by getting Anaheim to retain on Manson. Like, they're in a really enviable position, because if it's not Giroux, they can check down to someone else that could still be a really good fit at a lesser cost that might give you a pretty significant impact.